All right, well, good. We'll go ahead and get started then. So, hey, thanks for coming out. So, what we'll do is we're going to walk around the fort today. I'm going to take you out in and out of some of the different buildings here, give you an overview of the fort site, and then answer any questions you might have that you're curious about or want to know specifics about the site. So, again, welcome to Fort Clinch. Fort Clinch is one of the 42 forts that were built for national defense. They come out of the War of 1812, and the government realizes that a new series of fortifications are necessary to safeguard the country's major seaports and waterways. So with that, they immediately look out to buy property, and they do so in 1842. They buy the north end of Amelia Island. And then from that, they start surveying the area. They're looking at the waterway. They see that the town of Fernandina is growing, the town of St. Mary's. The communities along the St. Mary's River are sprouting up. So there's a need for major commerce trade in the area, and it's starting to really come alive, especially now that it's under United States rule. We're out of Spain rule, where 1821 we bought Florida from Spain. And so they're examining that. And so in 1847, they go ahead and start initial construction here in November of that year. And the fort itself is going to be a truncated hexagon, 5-sided, designed to hold about 500 soldiers and 77 pieces of artillery. And its purpose is to guard the Cumberland Sound, which would deny direct access to the St. Mary's River and the Amelia River and the communities along the river. And this is where you want to stop an invasion force, because the only way to invade our country was by crossing the ocean by ship. And at the time, we're really not in a war. Even though we are in the conflict in Mexico, the Mexican-American War, this fort is not built for any specific conflict. It's built for national defense. It is to be here in case we need it, and we don't need it. It's sitting locked up. Nobody's here or in caretaker status under an Army Ordnance Sergeant. So the only way in and out of the fort is how you've entered right here today. This is the Sally Port. You crossed over the drawbridge coming into the fort. It is actually a working drawbridge. It has all the original iron work that is in place, and Park Service worked really hard to do a restoration on that. The outside of the fort has two defensive levels. It has what is the glacis. It's an earthen mound that encompasses the fort on all sides, and then it also has a dry ditch, not a moat. The Army said there was no need for a moat here at Fort Clinch because we're already on an island, and because of the soil content here, it's really hard to hold water for a long period of time. The soil just absorbs it up. So we have a dry ditch, which is a low spot in front of the fort's walls, and when we go into one of the bastions, I'll point out what makes that really unique is that dry ditch, that low spot in front of the fort's walls. So the brown brick here is construction of the fort starting in 1847, continues on until 1860. With differences coming about, they realize that obviously the clouds are gathering. There's going to be a conflict possibly. Maybe it could be settled peacefully, maybe not. But the United States Army Engineering Office decides that they're going to abandon the fort. They pull out the Army engineering officers in the fall of 1860. Abraham Lincoln is elected president, and goes into office. And with that, Southern states immediately start leaving the federal union, the republic. And with that, the Southern forces here on the island start organizing. Now, they're already aware of Fort Clinch. They know the fort's here because town folks here worked at the fort as civilians employed by the Army's Corps of Engineers. So they're not in a rush to gain control of the fort. They know the level of the fort's construction. They also know there's no military garrison here and there's no artillery in the fort. And so they just basically are waiting. On April 8th, 1861, the Southern forces, state militia, they take formal possession of the fort. They install the first flagpole ever in the fort on the parade field where this one is here today. They raise the secessionist flag of Florida, and now they are in possession of the fort. They quickly realize, though, that the fort's level of construction is not to a point where they could best defend it, so they're going to have to bring in artillery, and they also decide that they're going to build artillery batteries at other points around the island. One is south of the fort, one is over on Cumberland Island. And so they go ahead and start erecting new artillery batteries over the summer of 1861. And they build up a sizable force. They get up to about 3,500 Confederates here on Amelia Island. And they've got good ideas about how they're going to defend the waterway, but there's a problem. They're lacking logistics, and without those logistics, they're not going to be able to hold out here for a very long period of time. In January of 1862, Robert E. Lee comes here, takes a tour of inspection. He was the military commander overseeing the defenses for South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And he is impressed with the defenses, but the officers here make it aware to him, we are lacking enough logistics to hold out for a long period of time, and we need to have those logistics directed to us. He tells them that he's going to work on that when he gets back to his headquarters in South Carolina. He gets back there, and on February 19th, he sends a telegram to the department commander here, General Trappier, commanding Confederate forces in Northeast Florida. You are being authorized to abandon Amelia Island and Cumberland Island, evacuate as many of the troops as possible, logistics and supplies and artillery, and get off the islands. And so they start doing that. They're on a time crunch because their intelligence has already told them that a federal military expedition is putting to sea and is coming here to capture the place. And they do. On March 3rd, 1862, the federal fleet is in full force here. They had gradually shown up the last few days of February. But by March 3rd, they're all here, they're in place, and by that time, the bulk of the Confederates are gone from the island and are out of the fort. And there's no firing, there's no shooting at each other until the warships enter the Amelia River and run for the town. The idea was to cut off the Confederate evacuation over the railroad trestle bridge, which had been made use of to evacuate Southern forces and citizens from the town. They catch the last of two trains leaving, and they open up on the last train, and they actually score a hit. And it's interesting, it's the only time in the history of the U.S. Navy they scored a hit on a moving train. So it's pretty good. They got it. So with that, Confederates evacuate, the island is enveloped by federal forces, they take over, and then the 1st New York Engineers are posted to Fort Clinch here, company, and their job is basically to restart the construction that had ended in the fall of 1860. And so what we're going to see now is the fort continuing from its pre-war construction into its wartime construction and bringing it to the level that we see today by 1864. There's 5.5 million bricks here in the fort. They only needed about 1.5 million left to go to finish it. During the course of the war, they will mount 34 pieces of artillery out of the 77 that they had planned to have here. Now, the fort was going to accommodate a garrison strength of up to 500 soldiers, but it never going to get that high. The highest number here is about 250. And so they make use of the fort, they continue the construction, and of course, you know, we have what we see today, and we're going to go in and out of some of the different buildings and walk around, and I'll get you a chance to get up on top there. So the first two buildings here is the guardhouse here to would be my left, and the stockade to the right. So why don't we go over to the stockade room, we'll have a look there. So every army post would have a stockade or prison. We're no different. It is small. It's only designed to hold up to 21 prisoners. This is actually the center room is where the guard detachment would be posted. This would be a 12-man guard detachment. And at any given time, 6 would be on duty and 6 would be sleeping, resting, eating, waiting to go back on their guard duty. You stood a 2-hour watch and 4 hours off through a period of roughly 48 hours. And at the end of the 48 hours, you were relieved and a new detachment of guards would take over. We have 3 holding cells: loose confinement, closed confinement, solitary confinement, and depending on the severity of the crime that had been committed is the level of confinement you would be in and for how long. So they did vary in days. Loose confinement is generally hard labor. The soldiers, prisoners here are forced to do labor around the fort. So is closed confinement. Closed confinement, though, they add ball and chain to them. They're out there dragging that around. And then solitary confinement, total isolation of them. They strip them down of all belongings. They go into the room through the bottom of the door. There's a small door. They can pass their meals through that. They get blankets to have in there. They get a bucket to do their business in. And so that's pretty much where they're at. In many cases, the stockade here at Fort Clinch is really never used. However, though, at one time, they had up to 101 prisoners assigned to the fort under sentence of hard labor, and they were using them. And so basically, in a sense, they were using the entire fort as a stockade, not just this room. And so they would have them in a certain spot, either locked in one of the bastions or even some of them locked up in here, and they were being monitored, and then every day they'd be brought out and used to work around the fort site. This is brown brick, which was brought in from Georgia. There are 2 primary brick yards. There's the Hermitage Yard at Savannah and the what we call Brickyard Landing, or the St. Mary's Brickyard up the river behind us. And this is where the brown bricks came in. The floor is a herringbone pattern and is very nice. And it's the only herringbone pattern in the entire fort. And We can see it here where it is definitely worn down, and that is because the floor was laid out using wall bricks and not a harder brick or what we would consider paving bricks. And so you literally have worn down from all the foot traffic in and out. The walls were plastered. Unfortunately, though, they had a hard time here getting the plaster to cure all the way. Because of the humidity here, they never could get the room to dry out. So the upper portion is still remnants here today. We can see that. And the lower portion is pretty much just about gone. And of course, that's because the lower portion, it's more cooler and damp down here, but hot air rises, so the upper portion was, of course, curing better. Large doors and windows allowed for good ventilation. High ceilings allow for good ventilation. Believe it or not, the troops don't complain too much about the weather, as they complain more about like insects and the lack of war news. They're always starving for information about what's going on in the country at that time. So you have loose confinement. You're going to hold, like I said, up to roughly 21 prisoners here. So you're going to get 15 in there, you're going to get 5 enclosed, and then 1 in solitary. And so this is typically what you would see here at the time. I'll open up the solitary cells. You can have a look there. That's always everybody wants to know what solitary looks like, and it's just an empty room. There's nothing in it. There you go. Yep, just an empty room, nothing more to it.
And how many people do they keep in there?
Well, just as it is, solitary, one person at a time. Yeah. If you got a prisoner here that was to go into solitary confinement, they would hold them in another cell until the solitary cell became vacant, and then they would move you into that. However, in some cases, there are complaints that, well, I was sentenced, 30 days of solitary confinement, but I spent 5 days in loose confinement. So that's 5 days off. No, the orders were for 30 days in solitary. So you did 35 days and not 30 days. So you got 5 days there in loose, and you got 30 days in solitary. So yeah. Yeah, the Army they don't cut on anything like that. You're going to get it all the way out. So yeah, it is interesting though. And there's a lot of good documentation about the stockade room here. They did hold some soldiers here that were executed by the Army here at Fernandina. There were 3 soldiers that were executed by the 97th Pennsylvania for desertion in the face of the enemy, and they were held here at the stockade here at Fort Clinch and then brought to Fernandina town where they were executed in front of their comrades. They generally did it as a means to show everybody, hey, here they are, we're going to shoot them right here. And they did it by firing squad. So, yeah.
So for the brick, what's the maintenance and pointing?
That's ongoing all the time here. We have a full-time brick mason on staff with us, and he is constantly working in and around the fort. We examine areas of the fort and look at the most critical areas, and then from there we focus on that. And then we have a full-time carpenter restoration specialist on hand that works with the doors, windows, all the lumber needs of the fort site. And then I have another part-timer that works here on the fort site and does a little bit of everything, interpretation as well as maintenance as well, and helps out the other 2. So yeah. So it's an ongoing process here constantly. All right, we'll go over to the Army barracks. All right, this is the main Army barracks here at Fort Clinch. It's actually the only barracks building that was completed. Started in 1863 and they wrapped it up by 1864. It still needed some internal work to be done, but it was intended to sleep roughly about 150 to 170 men. It's divided into separate living quarters based on military rank. The upper level for common soldiers, the 2 main open rooms up there could roughly sleep about between 65 to 75 men each. The lower side here was for corporals, and then a grouping of privates that the Army would consider their most senior privates in line to become a corporal or promote. And then the far end, the far right end, is the sergeant's quarters, and we'll go in there. We have some really good documentation from Sergeant Hughes, whose quarters was in there. His items are on display in the museum, and we'll actually go into what was his room when he was here at Fort Clinch. So let's go over here to the Army barracks. You'll notice the building is in red brick. This is where the changeover is. Unable to acquire the southern bricks anymore, they decided to bring in New York and Pennsylvania red bricks. And so they bring them in for the construction. The granite is all from New Hampshire. It's all New Hampshire granite here. We do have a couple of pieces of Vermont, but most of it's all New Hampshire granite here. So let's go over here and have a look. Those are the downspouts. They come down from the gutter and feed into the cistern system here. We have an advanced water collection system here. We hold 55,000 gallons of rainwater here, which is our drinking, cooking water here at the fort site. We'll actually go out back here and we'll actually stand on top of 2 of the cisterns over here. So this is a typical Army barracks as far as this type of fort. They're double beds here. You know, they're sleeping 2 to a rack. They got a table to sit at and eat at. They have fireplace for comfort, oil lamps to see by. Again, high ceilings. These are vaulted arch ceilings here designed to support the 2nd story of the building and be able to hold such weights on it. We'll see that as we walk around the fort. This comes from the Romans. It's a Roman influence on engineering at that time. Vaulted arch ceiling allows you to stack other buildings on top of it. They started using iron. That was a new thing coming into play. In later years, we realized that if the iron's not maintained and cared for, it starts to rust and deteriorate. And so they're using iron in construction of the forts. And so we have these vaulted arch ceilings. We got that 2nd story of the building there. Really comfortable, cool here. Got a nice cross breeze through here. Large doors, windows again. The fort has this building has a drainage system that connects into the fort's drainage system. It's under the floor. It's where these X's come in. There's actually a drain right there in the center, and we can see one. There's one outside in the front room there. So this is kind of a squad of senior men, privates in line next to be promoted, and then the front room is a corporal's quarters right there. They would drape the beds with mosquito cloth, a netting, or called mosquito bar, and that would allow them to sleep with the doors and windows open as well. And so that they have that. Now, Fort Clinch is not what we consider a finished fort, so the furniture here is going to be rough, and we have the written accounts of that it was a rough lumber that they were using here to build tables, benches, and stuff. Once the fort is finished, then the government would contract with furniture manufacturers, and we would get a much better quality furniture and beds and stuff. And all this would just be converted back to board lumber and used elsewhere. So, yeah. All right, we'll go out here. Come on in, folks. You gotta come in this one here to see this.
Are we all good friends, Frank?
Yes, should be.
We will be after this.
So as time goes forward, we get technological advances, obviously, and so this was no different than this time period. This building had running water in it. There are 2 tanks on the 2nd story of the building below the line of the gutters up on the 2nd level, and they had piping that came down to faucets, and they had running water in this building. It's the only building that has it. None of the other buildings do it. Now, the big metropolitan cities started incorporating running water by collecting rainwater on the roofs of the buildings, trapping it in tanks, and then at various levels below that, you could open the faucets and you could get water. This is to actually be a washroom, changing room for the soldiers here. So it'd be a trough here where they would actually have the water to run into. They could get washed up, get cleaned up. So kind of interesting that we have this technology. Another technology on this building is there are little iron air vents on the front walls, side walls, and on the back here. And this building is a 2-wall system. It has an outer wall and an inner wall. Now, as this sun is shining on the outer wall, that heat is being radiated into the airspace. But because hot air rises, it's traveling up and escaping out the air vents at the top of the building. So you have a positive flow of air running around the building here. And this building has the 2-wall system where the earlier buildings do not. It's a solid wall without that airspace. So yeah, so running water. Yeah. And right here, some of my folks always ask about these little wooden slivers that are in here. They've been in here for 160 years. This is where the framing work would go to create the door jambs and the framing to hang the doors on this. This would have had a door here. And we can even see like rust spots in it where the nails were to hold all the facing boards and then the trim. Because this was supposed to be all trimmed out and then it would have been plastered. But they decided not to plaster, so they started whitewashing the walls And unfortunately, they never got around to whitewashing it, so we have all this nice red brick to look at. But yeah, so we have a porch here, and we have a veranda directly above us. And this is well documented. The soldiers talk about sitting out here, eating their meals, spending their off-duty time. Also, religious services would be held. They'd get their army chaplain to come here, or the ministers would come out, and they would set up back here, and the men would gather up here, and he would be out here, and he would be ministering to them. So they had an area to sit, especially if the weather is nice it is. They would generally sit out here and take all 3 meals. Of course, rainy weather, they're back inside. The veranda is well talked about as well. They talk about hanging their clotheslines across the top here and hanging clothes and blankets up on that. And then, of course, sitting up there, and then they talk about watching the sunset to the west of us. They talk about the smell of the bakery, which is right here behind us, where all their flour goods were getting done. These big gray floored areas here, these are 2 cistern tanks. These are 2 7,500-gallon water storage tanks. And so we are collecting rainwater off the roofs of the building. It comes down, goes into a trap, passes through gravel and sand, and then goes into the cistern tank. And then they bring a pitcher pump over here on a platform, open up the center here, put the platform in and the pump, and you would just sit here and pump up rainwater, which would be your drinking cooking water. So every time it rained, they'd fill out all their cisterns. But they're really clever because they also have an overflow system. As the water rises, it spills over into a trap, goes down under the floor of the gallery, out around the bastion flooring, and drains into the ditch outside the fort. So you never could overfill the cisterns. So you're not like all this water bubbling up out of it. So let's have a look here in the bakery. This is one of my favorite rooms here, well documented. So the bakery, complete operation from the kitchen, totally separate. They'd have about 6 to 8 soldiers that would work in the bakery. You have a pantry on the other side. They would mix all the flour and the lard and the yeast, get everything all put together and get it ready to bring over here, let that dough rise, and then into the ovens. So they have 2 big ovens here. To give you an idea how big they are, this is an oven peel. This is what is used to slide the bake trays into the oven here. That's all the way the back of that oven right there. And bread and biscuits were very popular here at Fort Clinch, and it was a staple. They had flour goods at all 3 meals throughout the day, breakfast, dinner, and supper. A smaller oven, they talk about doing like pies and cookies and things like that and stuff, but bread and biscuits was their staple here. And so you have a little bit smaller oven over here. You got a wood-burning stove, which would be fired up. They could cook additional stuff, also get the ovens warmed up, get the room warmed up if it was cold, because they need to get that dough to rise in here. Got all of our working tables here and stuff, and then, of course, the prep room. If you look up top here, the roof is inverted downward, and the reason for this was to collect water for the cistern tanks out in front here. So it's actually creating like a trough right there, and water is actually backing up because it's just trying to get off this roof, get down the drainage system, and then into those cisterns there. This is really unique because I worked with one of our volunteers. Matter of fact, he was a member of the Friends of Fort Clinch. I was on the board. His name was Chris Oakey, and he actually was a treasurer for the longest time. And me and him were up on top up here. This was back in the late 90s. And I was looking down the chimney here. On the one side, it had a chimney, and I'm looking down in there. I could see all this trash in there. And I'm like, well, how am I going to get that trash out of there? And Chris said, hey, let's go over to the maintenance shop and get a hoe that you use for hoeing in your garden. And we'll drop it down there and turn it sideways and catch a bottle and pull it up and then take the bottle off the bottom of the trough. So we did that, and we were able to fish out all the stuff. And then I realized, well, wait a second, that's open now. So then we came in here and we looked in here and we're like, we were missing all of this floor bricks. So we didn't have any of this floor bricks. So I said, well, maybe we can look into getting a contractor out here. So we had 3 contractors come out. They gave us estimates. And the Friends funded the project. It was about $3,000 to go in and re-brick all the ovens here, the flooring and any tucking and pointing that need to be done. And then one of our board members, Terry Stewart, who blacksmithed here at Fort Clinch, was on the board. He got one of our local metal shops to cut out all the metal so that we could put the plates in and hang the doors back on here. So this is a project that the Friends did. Now here's the catch. These ovens had not been used since the Spanish-American War. And in 1998, they were now back online being used again, and they're used every first weekend when we're here in the fort. You can come over here and you can see 2 or 3 soldiers in here making biscuits, making bread, and running the ovens. When we do our volunteer appreciation dinner, we do the small oven heated up, and we actually warm up like the dinner rolls and biscuits that they have for that. So if you come by on the first weekend, you can see the ovens going. So yeah, nice to have this back in use again. So yeah. All right, let's go walk around some more. I'm going to open this up here because I wanted to share with you just how much thought and effort. This site was not thrown together. I don't get any idea that they just said, oh, let's see if we're going to build a fort. No, this was thought out, years of thinking, years of engineering to make happen. And this is probably one of the most unique things we have now on display here at the fort. If I can get my key to unlock it. Oh, maybe not. No, not that one. Yep, there it is. This is the underground drainage system to the fort here. And so what happens is, as this cistern fills with water, it spills over into this box. Now this box has got some water in it, but it still goes down about another 8 inches. And the reason for that is so that anything that's in water that's heavy goes where? To the bottom. So all the heavy stuff goes to the bottom. As the water rises, it goes into this drain here. It goes this way to a junction box, and where those folks are standing turns, goes under the floor of the gallery, around the bastion, and drains the water into the ditch. This network is under this fort all over the place. So is the drainage system that drains water from here. The water comes down here, goes into a catch basin there, goes this way underneath, and drains water into the cistern. And at the corner of the cistern over here is the trap room where the water passes through the trays of sand and gravel before filling the cistern tanks to clean out all their impurities or roof debris. Back then, rainwater was 100% for them. So, they're not like, oh, well, this is bad water, dirty. They don't understand bacteria or germs. But the drainage system, though, is pretty unique here. And so is the collection system. So, yeah. We've got 2 of these now uncovered and opened up on display now. And it really shows how advanced it is. I mean, this is a brick drain. And that's brick all the way down and all the way underneath. That's not clay, that's not cast iron, that's brick that had to be laid by brick masons and then covered over. And all of this had to go in first before they even started laying out buildings and stuff and foundations. They had to get the drains and all that in place close to the structures. Yeah. So you have the blacksmith shop on this side where we do all of our metalworking here in the fort. We don't make guns, we don't make cannonballs, we don't do any of that. We make things that we really can use around the fort. That stuff is generally made at armories or made by private manufacturers that have contracts with the government to produce weapons, munitions. So we make hooks for the kitchens to hang pots on. We make trivet stands so you can put a pot on with hot coals underneath it. We make hinges. This is a mount. It'll mount to the wall and then have a pin come in, and then you'll have a hinge. Let's see if I can find one of the hinges. Makes utensils for the kitchens, boot scrapers. Yep, here's one right here. Here's one that's already ready to go, give you an idea. And so this will mount to the framing work and then a mount to the door, and you'll be able to open your door there. So you have that. You've got your forming blocks. You got the anvil. It's a coal run forge. We have the bellows in the back. This up here is the actual forge. This is where the duck nest is. It's where the fire would be. We have the bellows here. We can blow air in to heat up that coal, get it to the temperatures we need to work the metal here. And you can see all the stuff that we have hanging up here with chain link, a little bit of everything. We've got here pole vise, working bench. So we're pretty talented here at the fort site. I've worked in here in the shop as well, so has my predecessors over the years, making things that we need for the fort. That room over there, that's our farrier shop. That's where we actually shoe our horses and mules. So let's have a look over here. The stables are outside the fort, just beyond the west wall. It's where the stable building was, also a wagon shed out there, grain room, hay room, tack room. They had the ability to keep the mules and horses there. The fort had roughly 8 horses and 20 mules. They actually come right through that door. They're brought right in here. They're tethered right here to this post. And then you've got the farrier over here trimming their hoofs down and fitting new shoes to them. So we deal with more mules than we do horses. It's because the mules were used for labor. They're better suited for labor in and around the fort, pulling wagons and supplies. So, yep. And then, of course, if you're up here at the fort on some of our first weekends, we'll have our horses out here. Myself and my co-worker of mine will bring them. You can see them in here getting trimmed, or see them in the back over there eating their hay and drinking water, waiting to come up here to be trimmed. So yeah, this was a working shop. This was the farrier shop used by the Army. Yep. Anybody know what that says? Okay. What's the first 2 letters spell? Just the first two letters at the top. What's the next 3 letters spell? What's the next 5 letters spell? Mules 2. There you go, see? Yeah, keep you on your toes a little. All right.
So behind this area right here, there's a huge bellows.
Yes.
How is that used?
So what this does is it's a double chamber bellows. It has an upper compression and lower compression. And what you do is as you pull the handle, you're bringing up the bottom compression, but the top also comes down if I unlatch it there. And you're getting more air pressure in here, more airflow into the forge. Yes, you need that. The more air you get on the fire, the hotter it gets. And you want to get to a certain working temperature.
That's a big bellows.
We're doing a restoration of this building here with our volunteers in the fort, and they are laying out the flooring here. So this side is almost done. There's a couple of things we still need to tweak, and we're moving in that direction, but we're getting there. And this gives you an idea of what the barracks upstairs would have looked like. And then we have flooring material here, and then on the other side, we'll go on this side. There's a little, just be mindful where you step over here. So this is where the volunteers are laying the new flooring down. So what happened was the Park Service poured this concrete floor in here, which would never have been here. And they poured a concrete floor, and this was a museum room upstairs here in both these barracks areas in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, and then they took it out when they decided to create the Living History program. So the concrete floor is not appealing, you know, it's wrong, actually, it's not period correct, but the tongue and groove floor would be period correct over the stonework up here to either protect the bricks that we would see, which would be the top of the arches that are below us. So you can see here where they're laying out the flooring and stuff. And this is a project that's the park is funding. This is something that we've always wanted to do. If you'll... Yes, what it'll do is once we do this here and we tweak a couple other things we need to do up here, we'll have this open when we have interpreters up here. So you'll be able to come up in the barracks and see the interpreters up here. And that'll give them a chance to, you know, see what the upstairs of the barracks looks like. And then, of course, we have the veranda out back here as well. So, yeah.
No, but would there be a ceiling?
There would. This would be a ceiling. There's the access space there. And you basically, the ceiling up here, the attic was actually used as storage. And so, yeah. We're not going to put in the ceiling, though. It'll just stay open like this. But, yeah.
Why did the type of brick change?
So suppliers, they're using New York and Pennsylvania red, so you have different colors involved. And then this section here is actually Park Service restoration red bricks when they put the new roof on this building. This roof had to be replaced, and they, of course, went with a new roof and then had to do brickwork as well. But yeah, these little squares are kind of interesting above the fireplaces. There's one here and one here. They're on both sides, and they're also downstairs. It allows for wood-burning stoves to come out. So you could have a wood-burning stove, and the piping coming up goes across and plugs in, so you can maximize heat more in the room. And that goes to show you that it was getting cold here.
Right.
Yeah. Yep, these were put in to stabilize the doorways here. Yep. This area is the parade field where the troops would parade and drill on. It's also where they would conduct their funeral services. They'd also have recreational opportunities out here. They played rounders, they threw horseshoes, they'd have wheelbarrow races, greasy pig contests. And so this is the open area. This is the parade field of the fort. It's always been in the military. It's always considered a place of respect and honor because a lot of times, like I said, they would hold their funeral services for their dead. Even though our fort never saw direct combat, men that lived here at Fort Clinch went off and participated in military engagements near to us, and some of those men never returned here. So this was their final home. Others died here due to sickness and accidents. And so it's always been considered a place of respect and honor, and this is why we have this big area. They can drill the men out here. The commanding officer can address them. So, yep. And of course, the flagpole has always been at the center. You got a new flagpole out front out there. That's our new pole, yep. We're going to try and get that in here. That's going to give us 5 foot more than what we currently have. The original flagpole here in the fort was 70 foot tall, so we're getting there. We're up to 65 finally. So this is our storehouse building, and you can see the different color of bricks. You've got the brown, you've got the New York and Pennsylvania red bricks, the downspouts, the wood, that's the feeding into the cistern system, the drainage there. We'll go up the staircase here on the left and go into the upper level, the quartermaster, and then look at the infirmary up there. So the infirmary, this was it here at Fort Clinch. It's really small. They had a hospital steward stationed here that would tend to men's medical care. Up to a certain point, he'd either send for the physician to come here from the Army hospital in town, or he would send you to the physician there in town. So, yep. So we got the beds here and medical supplies and stuff. And the hospital stewards were really good. They also were pharmacists. They ran the apothecary. And they were really good at taking care of the men here at the fort site. And so, yep, got the desk there. There's a treadle dental drill there. Work on your teeth. Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right, let's go. We'll go over here. We'll have a look on this side. This is all commissary. So what you're seeing here is food rations that are stored up here on this side of the building.
Washington City.
Yeah. Yeah, so you got salt pork, salt beef, salt fish, you got canned goods, desiccated vegetables, you got sacks of beans, rice, coffee, sugar, tea. You got hardtack boxes that would hold hardtack, the old Army bread there that was given out to soldiers. Pickles, molasses, vinegar, alcohol for medicinal medicine purposes only. Yeah, the thing is you don't actually have to be sick, you just have to be convincing. And if you're convincing, you get 4 ounces of whiskey, and if you're not, you get 4 ounces of castor oil and sulfur. So there you go. It's best to be convincing, I say. So yeah, we've worked up here in the past couple of years doing a restoration here. Re-whitewashed all the walls, hung up the candelabras, candle chandeliers, brought in furniture, acquired barrels from some of the whiskey distilleries so that we could stencil them and use them for storing stuff in. Sacks made up, filled with stuff. Canned goods, we've been saving cans like crazy and then putting correct labels on the cans to show canned goods. Canned goods were very popular back then. Canning was really big in America by that time, so yeah. Yeah, yeah. What's that? Say that again?
Where was this spot?
This is the commissary. All positions of food, provisions of stuff that you need to eat. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, you don't have to buy anything here. Everything you get for free here. Yeah. The Army gives the soldiers all their food and all their equipment without make them pay for it. So no, this is just the desk here and table for the commissary sergeant to work off of. Mm-hmm.
Did they rot out or were they
Yeah, so this side here, we can see a little bit of wood here. This was open. The other side was open over there. Now I'm going to tell you a really unique story about up here, and we'll get out of here because it is kind of warm. This was a living quarters for the park staff in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. A park ranger lived up here with his family. So you had a kitchen here in the hallway area right here. You had a living room, dining room. This was a bedroom. It had a walled partition here, another bedroom over there, and then a bathroom and storage over there on the back side. And you entered in on this side here. And they did away with all that and opened it up. And for years, even when I was here as a volunteer, it sat empty. It was just empty rooms with the paint peeling, ceiling falling down. And then in late 90s, we started doing some work up here, but it never got to this level. This really happened for us during the pandemic, because myself and my co-worker were like, well, we're working every day at the fort, even though the park is closed. Let's tackle the commissary. And we worked in here, and we scraped, and we painted, and then we got the volunteers to lug these barrels up the staircase for us. And we got them in here, and we stacked them all up, and we did a big job to get this open. But for years, this is just empty rooms. Didn't even come in here. But yeah, it was a living quarters. But historically, it was a commissary storage for food storage for the fort. So yeah, kind of interesting. That is a scale to weigh out rations to the troops here. They get so much food, and you can weigh out a company gets so much pounds of coffee, sugar, beans, rice, lentils, stuff like that, and that's a big scale there. Those are the weights. Those are the different weights right there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm working with the vice president of operations for Bacardi, and he was here this summer, and I've been talking with him. They're getting ready to dump a bunch of barrels, but usually when they do, they literally sell them. And he is trying to get me a tractor trailer of free barrels, which would be like 400 barrels, which we would make use of, because these things were all over the place here. So yeah, so it's even going to grow even more. Yeah. So I'm working with him to get them to give us some barrels. Foundation. So this would have been the officers' barracks at Fort Clinch. This is where it would have been built right here. However, it never was. So the officers lived outside the fort, some in temporary quarters. Captain Sears, the commanding of the fort, lived over at Old Town Fernandina. You got a oyster shell tabby base here for the building to sit on top of. And then, of course, red brick here being laid out. These are original bricks from the fort here that we use in restoration around the fort site. All right, let's go look at a kitchen over here. So this is what they call the troop kitchen. This could feed up to 125 men, 3 meals a day. Pantry in the back for food storage, cabinets with cast ironware, pots, pans, crocks, and all that. Oven for cooking meats and vegetables, same as like what we have over in the bakery right there. So they are. Firebox behind me here, pot crane. Hold the big kettles on right there, which I've got them here. They're there, down there. Got to remember, I had them up on the top of there, and I moved them down there. And so then the working tables in here. Now, the men don't eat in here. What they'll do is they'll prepare all the food here, load it up into the hand cart, and they'll take it over to the barracks, and the men will come in and sit together there and sit and eat. So they won't eat here in the kitchen. As you can see, there's really not a whole lot of room for that. You could have 100 men you're feeding out of this kitchen.
Did they have women working on the floors as well?
They did. They employed them as laundresses, and they hired women to do that and paid a wage for that, but they didn't have them cooking or cleaning or any of that. It's all soldier responsibilities.
So that other kitchen was strictly a bakery?
That's strictly a bakery, yeah. And then this is actually the kitchens, and there's 4 of them on this side here. Yeah, so yeah. Pretty impressive room here.
How big of a cart would you need?
It's around the corner over there. It's about the size of that table there, and all that stuff there fits into it. Yep, it's going. Yeah, they start breakfast about 4 o'clock in the morning. Get through that, get it served out, and then they start on the noon meal. They try to do all their cooking in the earlier part of the day, and then just maintain it throughout the day until it's time to be served. And then when the pots and pans and dishware comes back, they'll use prisoners to wash them out, or soldiers assigned to assist the cooks and stuff. But yeah. Yeah, one of the quotes is, I'll give you the oatmeal quote. The one soldier there, he comments about oatmeal. He says, on cold days, the cooks have oatmeal ready for us. There's only 2 things in our oatmeal, oats and meal. He goes, every once in a while they put in raisins, but those are just flies without wings. So yeah, that's a direct quote from one of the soldiers that was here. So yeah, but they eat pretty good. We have their accounts of their meals and stuff and what they were eating. And coffee was a staple drink, flour goods at all meals, beef, pork. They had an animal stockade in town where they kept cows and hogs for slaughter, so they could also give meat rations to the naval force when they were here, but also provide to the army here on the island. So yeah. Yep. All right, let's go down to the bastion. If you want to take a minute and walk in here, these are the service magazines for powder and ammunition for the guns. Cannons here at the fort. Have a look there. Latrines there, connected into the ocean.
Time to come back.
So this is kitchen one. This actually was the first kitchen to be completed by the Army. We have it set up as the laundry room. It allows for our female interpreters to be able to have a place to work. Now we know historically that the laundry for the fort was actually outside of the fort, but to keep people in the fort and to have them within here and give them a place to also be with the male interpreters, we've decided to set up this kitchen as a laundry room. The Army employed up to usually 4 women per company of soldiers, and they would wash clothes, do candle making, soap making, iron and stuff like that, and they drew a wage for that. The soldiers would deduct $1 from their pay to pay the laundresses. So you have this room to work. We have many items in here that of course are used by the laundress when they're here. We have the clothesline out front. Have a soldier stand guard to keep other soldiers away from bothering with the laundresses or trying to pick up their next wife, you know. It's lonely out here at the fort at times. But they do hand washing of clothes. They make candles. You can see here where they were doing hand dip candles. They make soap. Our female interpreters are really engaging with the public, so you can come in here. They'll be sewing, or they'll bring out the sewing machine, the treadle sewing machine, and show you how they would work the sewing machine here as well. So yeah, nice addition to our interpretation here at the fort side, and that opens the door for female interpreters as well. With this, and then with the infirmary upstairs, we can have like the Sanitary Commission, Christian Commission, Women's Relief Society. That allows for more female involvement in the fort. We're hosting a Civil War ladies conference weekend next weekend here, where these are ladies that go around the country. They're female reenactors, and they're coming here to hold their conference and training, and it's how to improve their interpretation and what they would wear back then. So they'll be doing some talks for the public throughout the day here, but they're mostly also improving their own interpretation so they can better present a more realistic experience to folks of how women dressed and what their functions were during this time period. So yeah. So if you get a chance, you want to come by and see that. That's all day Saturday. And actually, they're coming in on Wednesday, so they're here from Wednesday to Sunday. So yeah, and they're going to sleep in the barracks building, and they've I don't know what but they hang-shied 2 of our guys to cook for them. So they're going to cook in that kitchen down there. So they're actually going to try and they're going to cook period meals, was what we do, which you guys fund. I always constantly get a check from Bob to go buy groceries. So last weekend I did a potato and onion stew, but was a white gravy stew with, I did beef tips. I seasoned them all up, and then we served that over biscuits. I had all these biscuits, got the dough, and we went and made biscuits over there in the bakery and served that out. And then we have a punch, or a bug juice is what it's called, and we had that available for them to drink, and then of course coffee. So yeah. Yeah, you don't have no eggs here, so you're not like, no cracked eggs in the morning. Breakfast was generally bacon, biscuits, and coffee, and the noon meals were usually beef roast, pork roast, with potatoes, carrots, onions, beans, rice, lentils, and then coffee and a tea or a bug juice that they would make. It's fermented fruit with sugar water, and that was like a tasteful drink, like a punch for them. So yeah. All right.
You have to be to get the Maine lobster.
Oh, you can get that anytime. Yeah, you don't have to have any rank to get that here. It's all canned lobster, And it's funny because it was so popular back then, and today it's like, oh, well, that's expensive. I wouldn't. It's a, you know, it's a bottom. Yeah, it's a bottom feeder. You don't, classy people don't eat bottom feeders. So yeah, so we got that. We got them cans all over. So yeah, awesome.
They didn't eat shrimp, huh?
They very little, especially here. Not only that, they don't have the opportunity to actually cultivate or grow anything here, and they don't have the opportunity to really fish outside of recreation. They might go fishing, but they're not fishing to feed everybody here. They get fish here, but it's always dry cured, salt cured, or smoke cured. It's a ration, they get that. But they're not like fishing out here regularly. They just don't have the time for it. They're so involved in construction of the fort, and then units are being selected for off-island military operations, so they're coming and going all the time. They don't cultivate anything. That's why they have the quartermaster corps and the commissary corps that buys things and has it shipped into them. And they would get a regular supply ship here every week delivering goods to them. So yeah. All right, we'll go down to the bastion down here. I'll let y'all step out. It's not big. I can do. Did you want to drink of water? No, you don't need that. So this is a gallery. It's a connecting point from the parade field down to the bastion, and then this is a defensive tower called the bastion. What it would do, it would mount 4 howitzers, 24-pounders, 2 to each flank here, which enable you to fire down the outer wall. So if you'll step up to this side and look through the gun ports here, you can see back to the drawbridge. And earlier when we started this tour, I talked about the defensive feature around the fort and that this is not a moat, it is a dry ditch. So if you're in that ditch, you are dead. You are not coming out of there alive. They are shooting 2 24-pound howitzers from this side and 2 24-pounders on the other side, plus the riflemen, and they are literally knocking everybody down in that ditch. Yeah. You are up against the wall, and if you tried to think you're going to escape, you're going to turn around and go back up the glacis, which is going to put you in line with all the rifle ports. If you'll look here at these windowsills where the rifle ports are, you'll notice that it's sloped forward. There's 2 reasons. One, so when rain comes in, it runs it out. The other thing are for grenades. They will light grenades and roll them down out through there, and they will drop down there in front, and they will detonate. So if you think by hugging the wall, you're safe, you are not. The reason why these slits are long like that is so that they have a staircase here, and 2 soldiers or 3 soldiers will be stacked here. It enables them to shoot at different heights along the wall, especially on the other side here. So you have a 24-pound howitzer sits on these carriages here. Now that gun fires an exploding shell, which will be on a fuse. So as soon as it fires, that fuse is going to set off the charge inside the shell, and that shell is going to break into fragments, big chunks of iron. It's going to go ripping right down along that wall. The other one is they have a tin can that holds either musket balls or iron balls in various sizes. It could be a ½ inch, it could be a full inch, and that is a buckshot for a cannon. And they'll open up with 2 of those on this side, and that will just spread out into a wide pattern, and they'll just cut down anything. Those balls will pass through 3 and 4 men standing right next to each other. And so you are literally getting hit by everything here. The top of this tower has a gun position for a big gun, an 8-inch smoothbore or its equivalent in rifle caliber. There's a cistern underneath the floor. We're holding 5,500 gallons of rainwater underneath us, and that is a main powder magazine there. And we can hold roughly between 55 to 60,000 pounds of explosives in the fort's magazines here. So yeah. A ventilation system. And if you'll look up here above us, either here, you can step over to the side there, but if you look up here, you'll see a shaft above us. So as these cannons are firing, they're generating smoke and they're generating heat. But this building is designed to draw that all up and out through the top, so all of it escapes, so the lower level stays cool and comfortable and clears you of all the smoke and heat so you can work in here. And it would be loud in here, but you'd be up to your job in here. The staircase is a spiral granite staircase going to the upper level. And the shutters and doors here on the back are pulled and closed and would be plated. They'd have metal plating on the outside of them so that you can't break into us. So this becomes a fort inside of a fort, and there are 5 of these. Wow. Yeah. The walls here, side walls, are 4.5 to 5 foot thick, while the front wall here is 8.5 foot thick, with a ceiling above us that's 12 foot thick. Now, if you think that you're going to hit our powder magazine, you'd have to continuously hit that point over and over and over again. And by then, we've either moved the powder out to another position. Fort Pulaski in Savannah, Georgia was being shelled, and it took 38 hours for the Union Army to break through a wall that was 8.5 foot thick. So this fort can take a beating. So it is impressive. I mean, these vaulted arch ceilings, this is Roman engineering, and what it does is supports that gun on top and that gun in action firing back and forth. And there's not only are there men up there manning that cannon, but there's also men up there that's only job is to shoot people outside the fort. Bang, bang, bang. And when you're up on top there, you have this 360 view all the way around. I want to point out the real, to me, what I call is the real human touch here at Fort Clinch, other than just brick masons and stone masons and carpenters. But the stone masons here, if you'll notice here on the ground, you'll see a pattern working its way back and forth here. All right? And you'll see it over here, it's working its way here. That is the stone masons chiseling that piece of slate down to get it to a nice level so that they can put it in place. And if you look at this floor, look how these blocks are put together. That's all done by hand. There's no machinery doing that. That's real people 160, 180 years ago laying out this site. And that's the human connection here, that they actually built this. This is a real place. I have visitors today, they're like, oh, this is like Walt Disney. No, this is a real place. Men really built this, and it's here today. It survived hurricanes, it survived private ownership, it survived the Park Service. But here it is today. I mean, this granite, I mean, this is, you can see the little dimples in the stone here working back and forth, and this guy just working away on that to get that just right. Even here, you can see the lines coming down it. And all of this was laid in by hand and animals. I mean, you know, we're the second oldest structure on this island. The only thing older than this fort is the lighthouse. I mean, you know, there are buildings in town that date 1856, 57, but our guardroom and prisons were built before that 56 house. So yeah, I mean, it's a unique place, it really is. It's a real national treasure. And the state was smart in 1935 to acquire the property. They acquired it, they developed it as a state park, they brought in the CCC, they increased the acreage. I mean, to have a state park on an island like this and a resource for the community to come out and enjoy and see all the events, go to the beach, you know, you can make a whole day out here at the park. Whether you picnic, you go to the beach, you ride the trails, you visit the fort site. It's a very unique and enjoyable.
How long was it privately owned?
So 9 years, and it transferred ownership 3 times. And the last owners were like, we need to sell it to the state of Florida. So they contacted Dan Kelly, the state representative, and said, hey, we want to sell it. There were 2 parcels. There was the east parcel and the west parcel, and the state acquired both of them. It was known as the Fort Clinch Military Reservation, which was roughly about 1,100 acres of land, but it's increased to just over 1,400 acres. Plus, we also have 2 islands we manage as well. And then they used the CCC to do the restoration of the fort and actually develop the park, the camping areas, the picnic, cut the road the road you came down on didn't exist when this fort was here. The military road is to the west of us. It's closer to where the old Pogey Mill is, came across Egan's Creek, and the creek was not that deep back then. It actually was only about maybe 3 or 4 feet deep, and it had a footbridge that went across it, and you'd come up into Old Town. That's how you got out to the fort. That's how the military would traverse from Old Fernandina or even New Fernandina out to the fort site, but not on the road you came in on. CCC cut that road out. That's the Canopy Drive today.
And all the equipment and all everything came over to Egan's Creek?
It came over Evans Creek, or it came to the Fort Clinch's own pier. On the backside of the fort, about 300 yards away, the fort had a big, massive pier that was built by the Army when they initially broke ground here. The two major projects that they started with in 1847 was clearing the land and building a pier, because without the pier, they couldn't receive any of the equipment or the materials they needed. Yeah, yeah. All of that comes into our, we had our own pier and dock right here. But yeah, this building here received a restoration coming just out of the pandemic. We had a grant that me and Heath had worked on, and we got about $350,000 to do the restoration of this bastion. And I'm telling you, it was a lot. They retucked and pointed all the walls here and stuff, replaced damage and missing bricks and stuff. We got the flooring laid, we got the gun carriages in and stuff. So yeah, it's nice. Comfortable in here too. A lot of the troops would actually sleep down in the bastions because it just pulls this air through here. So it's pretty much comfortable all the time down here. Yeah, so it wasn't difficult to, you come down here and these guys are laying all in here. And some of them had beds in here. They also like to lay in the galleries. The galleries are bomb-proof causeways. When the fort's under bombardment, they are actually down here in the galleries or in the lower level of the barracks building or the quartermaster building, and they stay down here while the fort's being attacked, so they're sheltered from the bombardment. Then when it comes their time, they go up to their positions, take up, and they give it back to you. So yeah, kind of cool though. Yeah, impressive. All right, I'm going to send you all up on top, and I'm going to send you the easy way, which is right here. I'm not going to go with you because I've already seen it. But you got such a commanding presence here. I mean, you can control this waterway. A lot of folks ask me about why the buildings are taller than the fort, oh, the fort's walls, and you can, yeah, well, that's true, but land-based artillery shoots further than shipboard artillery, so we can outrange you and hit you long before you could ever hit us. So we have you zeroed in. The waterway here is pre-plotted to ranging markers all the way through the waterway. So the artillery crews here don't guess at shooting. They know where to shoot to be accurate at distances. So yeah, yeah.
Can you imagine how much that thing weighs?
That is 14 tons, 7.5 just by the barrel itself. They're casted at the Fort Pitt Foundry at Pittsburgh. It takes 10 soldiers to traverse this gun left and right, and they get just here like pushing on it. And they cycle, when the gun fires, it slides back on this rail. This here comes to about here. They lower the barrel down, they step up, they sponge out the barrel, they bring up the powder bag, that's 20 pounds, that goes in. Then they have a loading tray with the cannonball sitting on it. 2 soldiers lift that up. 2 other soldiers holding the rammer push the ball off the loading tray into the muzzle of the cannon, then run the ball all the way down, seated against the powder bag there, and then they pull out that rammer. Then they engage a set of rollers that would be here on the inside and on the other side, and then 2 men step up here with it's a hand spike that has a metal clip under it with a rolling wheel, and they put that up underneath here and they pull down on it, and this whole thing slides and rolls forward back into the firing position, and then they disengage it. Then 1 soldier steps up, drops a vent pick in, pokes a hole in the powder bag, inserts the friction primer, passes off the lanyard, then steps down, and the other soldier's holding the lanyard, and on the command fire, he pulls the lanyard, it snaps the priming wire, and it shoots a detonation, a charge into the powder bag. That powder bag detonates, and that cannonball's on its way. Wow. Yeah. And then that whole, when it fires, it slides back again. So you're getting, these are called friction rails. They're catching that as it comes back and slowing down the recoil so it doesn't come all the way back.
So how many people would take to fire 1 cannon?
10 soldiers.
Okay.
And get a shot off every 5.5 minutes. 5.5 to 6 minutes.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Did you say something, they light the cannon?
Yeah, so what they do, they use a magnesium priming tube called a friction primer. It has a wire going through the top of the tube. The tube is, you see if I can use, Dustin's not up here, is he?
Dustin.
You don't have a friction primer on you, do you? No, I don't. Okay, well, friction primer, I'll use this. So the friction primer is like the shaft of my key. The bottom part of it up so far is filled with powder, and the top is got a fermented mercury, and what it does is like magnesium. And when the wire crosses through the top, when you pull the wire out, it grinds here like striking a match. Best way to simplify it. And it ignites this, and then this just burns down. But the force is directed downward. It doesn't explode up. It explodes down, and it hits that powder bag, and that powder bag detonates. And then there you go. So you're not using like a torch to light off the cannon. And so you're using the friction primer. So yeah, instantaneous
So
firing.
when you're firing them for show, what do you
We use a friction primer, just like they
Just
do.
that?
The exactly
You use the
same
same
thing.
powder
Yep.
and everything?
Yep. We use same powder. We use just exactly
does
what
the
they
ball
do
go?
the show. Well, we'll just shoot a blank cartridge. So the cannon positions right here. If you notice, we're going from one size to the next size. So these two positions here and two over there, they were for 15-inch rodmans. They weighed 50,000 pounds. We have a cannonball in the museum. It weighs 328 pounds. Yeah. Uses 40 pounds of cannon powder. Send that ball out. So yeah, rails and everything. These holes connect to the magazines below to bring up the powder bags and specialty ammunition. They drop a harness down there and pull them up. This one's closed, got a plug in it. That one there is open. Yeah. I'm always amazed how they're able to move such massive weights. Yeah. I mean, 50,000 pounds. That's right there. That's 7.5 tons, just that cannon barrel. You know?
Amazing.
Yeah.
The
It's mind-boggling.
smarts and how they
Oh
figured
yeah.
out how to
They had
do
literature, mathematics, sciences, art. They had all that stuff. They're not no dummies.
things. They're not.
No, because if they were, we wouldn't be here today.